Thank you so much for turning up. My name's Rich Roll. It's a pleasure to get up in front of groups of people and talk about my favorite subject, health, wellness, fitness, diet, nutrition, and all this sort of stuff. So I'm going to kick this off with a little story. This is my grandfather. He is my namesake. He looks a little bit like me, you can even see. In many ways, my doppelganger. Richard Spindle was a champion swimmer back in the day. He was captain of the dynastic University of Michigan swim team back in the late 1920s. And he's a guy who had an American record. He was an Olympic hopeful. He was a contemporary of the great swimmers of his day, like Johnny Weissmuller, who went on to silver screen fame as Tarzan. And Richard Spindle went on later in years to become a pillar of his community. He never smoked, he was never overweight, and he continued to swim regularly in his beloved Lake Michigan. And yet, nonetheless, at age 54, too soon, Richard Spindle fell prey to America's #1 killer, heart disease. And I bring up the story of my grandfather, not only because we share the same name and not only because we look a little bit alike, but because our lives have followed remarkably similar paths. Because I too had been a champion swimmer in my youth. I was a member, although I was a bench warmer, I was a bench warming member of the equally dynastic Stanford University swimming program in the late 1980s. And I too had gone on to become a pillar of my community as a senior associate in a prestigious Los Angeles law firm. And I too brushed up against the fate that too soon took my grandfather's life. So here's me as a young, bright swimmer. So how did this happen? Well, it was on the eve of my 40th birthday. I remember it very distinctly. I had come home after a long, very stressful day at the office. My family was asleep. I checked in on my children who were sleeping soundly. I kissed their forehead, and I began to make my way up a simple flight of stairs to my bedroom. I was 10 steps up. I still had 10 remaining when I had to pause. I was winded, I was out of breath, tightness in my chest, sweat on my brow, buckled over, and really fear in my heart that I was on the precipice of having a heart attack, the same thing that had taken my grandfather's life too soon. And it was a very powerful moment of clarity in which I realized something was wrong. Something was very wrong with how I was living my life. But I was not alone. Because the truth is that illnesses related to nutritional disease have claimed more lives than in all the world wars combined. So when we look at the statistics, it's pretty staggering. Right now, 70% of Americans are obese or overweight. Heart disease, America's #1 killer. 1 out of every 2 people will suffer from heart disease. 1 out of every 3 Americans will die of heart disease. And they're predicting that by 2030, 50% of Americans will be diabetic or pre-diabetic. 75% of all healthcare costs in America are attributable to chronic lifestyle disease. And the great irony in all of this is that 80 to 90% of these chronic lifestyle ailments are easily preventable and oftentimes reversible through simple diet and lifestyle alterations. So the driver of these conditions really isn't anything new. But there's another dimension to this story and that goes unaddressed, and that's the journey that I want to take you guys on today. So let's get back to me on the staircase at 39, wheezing, fat, out of breath. How did I get there? Like, how did this happen? Well, it happened because I was living my life like most Americans, sedentary, stressed, and subsisting on what I like to call the window diet. If you can drive your car up to a fine dining establishment, roll your window down and they hand you food, that's what you eat. So for most of my life, this is the stuff that I was eating. French fries, McDonald's cheeseburgers, Coca-Cola soda, Taco Bell, nachos, like you name it. And I love this stuff. I love this stuff, and I ate it every single day. But it's a lifestyle that by 39 left me fat, left me out of shape, and it left me on the precipice of becoming a statistic, right? I realized I needed to make a change in my life. So the next morning, I turned to my hero my wife, Julie, who's sitting right over here. Stand up, Julie. She's hiding in the corner, so yeah. This is Julie. So Julie has always been the healthier person in our relationship equation. And quite amazingly, several years ago, she actually healed herself from what had been deemed an incurable cyst on her neck. And she did it not through surgery. All the specialists told her she was going to have it surgically removed. Instead, she healed it through plant-based nutrition and by using the principles of Ayurveda, which is a system of ancient Hindu traditional Eastern medicine. And you can see it there. That's the growth on her neck. Stand up. Do you have it on your neck now? Can you see it? Nobody can see it. She healed herself, right? There you go. Yes, big hand for Julie. So anyway, at this time, if you were to open up our refrigerator, there was a pretty clear demarcation line down the middle between like the crazy healthy foods that she was eating, you know, stuff like kombucha and kale and cauliflower. I mean, like, who eats that, right? And the super yummy frankenfoods that I was eating, like Haagen-Dazs and hot dogs and stuff like that. And Julie is somebody who has always been able to see the better me behind my many, many bad habits. And for years, she had been lovingly trying to get me to change my errant ways. She'd try this, she'd try that. Why don't you read this book? Why don't you read that book? But the more that she tried, the more that she kind of invested herself in me coming over to her side, the more I pushed back, the more I resisted. And then she decided to try something different. In a moment of what she calls divine love, she decided to let go, to allow me to my process, to basically make a decision to truly love me exactly as I was, without needing me to change or be anything different. And this very simple but very profound switch that was undertaken shortly before my staircase episode had a huge impact on me. Basically what it did is it flipped the mirror. And suddenly I had to look at myself and take accountability, take responsibility for my own lifestyle habits. Suddenly it was on me to make a decision about how I wanted to live, not for anybody else, but for myself. And so the irony was that now here I was, the morning after this staircase episode, asking Julie for help, right? And so my first step in this kind of evolution, this change that I was willing to explore, was to do a 7-day fruit and vegetable juice cleanse. Now, to kind of set the stage, this was about as foreign to me as saying to Julie, babe, you know the high heels and the dress in the closet? Like, I think that's what I want to wear to work today. Like, this is completely out of, like, my ballpark of experience. And I got to tell you, it was like, it was not fun. It was actually like a horrible experience. For the first couple days, I was laying on the couch, I was exhausted, I was fatigued, I was sweating, and I was like starving. I mean, I'd never gone a single day in my entire life without eating solid food. So I was like literally daydreaming of In-N-Out Burger all day long. I was ready to chew my arm off. I felt like I was detoxing off heroin. And I was hanging on as if my life depended on it. Because in many ways, it really was. It really was. And then an amazing thing happened. With about 2 days left in this juice cleanse experience, I felt an amazing resurgence in vitality. Like my energy stores came back. I couldn't believe how good I suddenly felt. And it made me wonder, is there a way of eating that would allow me to feel this good all the time? Is that possible? And maybe Julie was really onto something much more than I knew. Much more than I knew. So the next phase in this evolution, revolution that I was experiencing was to explore a vegetarian diet. My version of a vegetarian diet. My version of a vegetarian diet looked like this. Taco Bell bean and cheese burritos, Pizza Hut, as long as I didn't put the pepperoni on it, Pringles, Oreos, Haagen-Dazs still very much in the picture, right? So hardly like a healthy diet. I was rationalizing it. Well, this is healthier than what I was eating. So after about 6 months of playing this out, there I was back on the couch, fatter than ever, lazier than ever, depressed, ready to give up entirely on this whole notion of healthy eating altogether. And in a moment of what I can only say was despondency, my thoughts returned to my grandfather, the grandfather that I never knew. And I realized that I really couldn't afford to give up. And I thought, what would happen if I remove all of this processed garbage that I'm eating from my diet? And more importantly, what would happen if I got rid of all the animal products on my plate? I wonder if that would make a difference. And I actually didn't think that it would. In truth, I didn't really want it to. I mean, it didn't really sound that great. I mean, what was going to be left to eat after all of that? Like, I just couldn't fathom it. I couldn't imagine it. But I went ahead with it anyway. And little did I know at the time, but that decision would create this butterfly effect that would send out positive ripples of change across the globe, right? So I want to talk a little bit about demographics and statistics as we explore this idea of the butterfly effect. Right now, our world population is exploding. Scientists estimate that by the year 2100, our global population could reach 11 billion people. How are we feeding these people, right? Our current mode for feeding the planet is industrialized animal agriculture. And industrialized animal agriculture is incredibly wasteful, it's incredibly inefficient, and it's unsustainable with respect to our dwindling resources, natural resources, and our diminishing amount of arable land. And what you might not realize is that industrialized animal agriculture is actually the #1 culprit when it comes to almost every single man-made environmental ill on the planet. Everything from species extinction to ocean dead zones to CO2 emissions. Animal agriculture is responsible for 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions, more than all of transportation combined. Water pollution and water use. 50% of all water in the United States is consumed for animal agriculture. It's incredible. The amount of water required to create animal-based food is exorbitant. 660 gallons of water to produce 1 quarter-pound hamburger. And dairy really isn't any better. 1,000 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of milk. It's also the #1 culprit when it comes to habitat destruction, destroying the planet's lungs at the rate of 1 to 2 acres per second. Incredible, right? Land use, 45% of all land is already devoted to livestock. And when we compare the amount of land that's required to feed a meat eater to that required to feed a plant eater, it's pretty staggering, right? 1.5 acres can either produce 375 pounds of meat or 37,000 pounds of plant food. A meat eater requires 18 times more land to feed than a plant eater. So, as the population continues to swell, and it will continue to swell, we just can't continue down this path. It's just not possible or sustainable to continue to feed the planet the way that we've been doing it without wreaking irrevocable havoc on the planet. And so it's incumbent upon us to try to determine a better way to feed the planet. And the good news is that there already is a better way. There already is a better way. Each and every day, a single person makes a decision to swap out the animal products on their plate and replace them with plant-based foods instead, creates this amazing butterfly effect. It saves 45 pounds of grain, 30 square feet of forest, 20 pounds of CO2 equivalent, 1,000 gallons of water, and let's not forget, 1 animal's life. It's pretty amazing. So we're already growing enough food to feed 10 billion people. World hunger is not an issue of scarcity. It's an issue of allocation and distribution. It's an issue of allocation and distribution. So the statistics are pretty clear here, right? Eating plant-based is really an amazing and pretty simple way to live more harmoniously on the planet and to preserve our planet's precious resources for future generations. So, of course, I didn't know any of this when I made this decision to explore plant-based eating. I actually was only obsessed with one thought, and it might be what's going on in your mind, although I'm preaching to the choir today, so probably not. But usually when I get up and talk, it's people that they're not used to the plant-based idea. And that idea is, where the hell am I going to get my protein if I do this? Where the hell am I going to get my protein? So I promise you I'm going to answer that question, but let's go back to me on the couch, my first plant-based meal. I'm on this new exploration, this new wave, and I have to tell you that within about 7 to 10 days of making this switch, I felt like a completely different person. I felt like a teenager again, like I did on those last 2 days of that juice cleanse. I was bouncing off the walls. I couldn't remember having so much energy. I felt like a teenager who was driving Julie crazy, driving her nuts. She's like, get out of the house. So for the first time in about a decade, I actually felt like exercising again. I actually had the desire to move my body, which was new to me. So I went in the closet and I dusted off an old pair of running shoes that were sitting back there unused. I went back to the pool for the first time in a very long time. And Julie actually bought me a bike for my 40th birthday. And my routine was really basic. It was nothing crazy. I just wanted to lose the belly fat. But the biggest change that I experienced was that I started to feel joy in my life again. I started to feel joy again. I went out for what I intended to just be like a 1-hour run. It was a weekday morning. I had a bunch of stuff to do, and that was my plan. And it was one of those days where everything clicked, and I was in the zone. And I ended up running 24 miles, farther than I'd ever run in my life, ever before. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I was capable of doing something like that, and I just started running like 3 or 4 months before. And I thought, what is going on? Like, either I just unlocked some crazy dormant gene that I didn't know that I had, or there was something about eating plant-based that is really agreeing with me in a way that I could not have previously imagined. So, where the hell was I getting my protein, right? Well, it turns out that I was getting it in the same place all of these amazing plant-based athletes seem to get it. They don't look too malnourished. And I was getting it in the same place some of the fiercest, strongest herbivores on the planet get it. Basically just eating lower on the food chain. Lower on the food chain. Greens and beans, grains and legumes, nuts and seeds. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my whole life, I've been taught beef is what's for dinner. You know, milk does a body good. If you want to build muscle, you have to eat muscle, right? And yet here I was feeling better, looking better, performing better, getting leaner and stronger with each successive week without eating the very foods I had been told my entire life are necessary to health and absolutely essential if you want to perform as an athlete. The world was upside down. And after abusing myself with drugs and alcohol and horrible lifestyle habits, stressful job and the window diet, in an incredibly short period of time, I had turned everything around. I had become reborn. And I was so struck by the resiliency of the human body to bounce back like that, that it led me to a question that would soon become an obsession, which was, what am I truly capable of? What am I truly capable of? And it's this obsession that led me to the world of ultra-endurance sports, the ultimate test of human resiliency, right? So in 2009, I set my sights on this crazy race called the Ultraman World Championships. It's widely considered to be one of the most grueling endurance challenges on the planet. It's a 3-day, 320-mile double Ironman distance circumnavigation of the big island of Hawaii, which is a pretty big island. It's about the size of Connecticut. The first day, as you can see on here, you swim 6.2 miles and you race your bike 90 miles. The second day, you ride your bike 171 miles. And on the third day, you celebrate the whole thing by running a double marathon, 52 miles, right? Like, totally insane. When I first heard about this race, I thought, can a human being even do that? Like, is that even possible? Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I just thought it was so extraordinarily out of any frame of reference that I had, just completely insane. And honestly, that's what my friends thought too. They thought I was insane for entertaining the prospect of even attempting to try to do something like this, let alone the whole like plant-based diet craziness, because that's like, you know, that's super insane, right? And it's funny because when I was on the window diet and I was eating McDonald's every day, nobody seemed to question my lifestyle habits. Like, that's just fine, right? And now here I was, feeling better, looking better, fitter, stronger than I could ever remember being. And yet suddenly, everybody had become a professional nutritionist, very, very concerned about how I was living my life. But fueled by nothing but plants, I was able to go from this kind of schlubby, 39-year-old, overworked, window diet addicted guy into this guy, which helps when you have a really good photographer who understands lighting. He knows how to like tell you to suck your gut in perfectly and all of that. I can recommend him. But the point is, yeah, again, like fitter, stronger than I'd ever been. Even when I was swimming at Stanford when I was 20 years old. It was crazy. And still, nobody thought that I had a chance at completing this crazy Ultraman race. You know, I'm a 43-year-old corporate lawyer with kids. Like, I didn't have any business showing up for this kind of thing. But not only did I finish it, I ended up winning stage 1 by a full 10 minutes. I led the race by 10 minutes. Well, not so fast. I crashed my bike on the second day, and that took me out of podium contention, but I still nonetheless completed the race as the fastest American and 6th place overall. So, and thanks. And that was an athletic accomplishment that landed me on CNN. It got me on the pages of Men's Fitness magazine, which named me one of the 25 fittest men in the world, which, believe me, like, I don't believe that I'm one of the 25 fittest men in the world, not for a second, but it was really helpful when it came time to sell a book. So that helped. Thank you, Men's Fitness, for that. But in the wake of Ultraman, I still wasn't satisfied that I'd really answered that question for myself. What am I truly capable of? So in 2010, my buddy and I, Jason Lester, set out to do something called Epic 5, where we attempted to do 5 Ironmans. That's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2-mile run on 5 Hawaiian islands and do it in 5 days. I figured if I could do that, then maybe I could answer that question for myself. And we got through that experience. It took us a little bit longer than 5 days, about 6.5 days to do it. But when the dust settled, we had done something that nobody in the history of humankind had ever done before. And we did it fueled entirely on plants. 703 miles of swimming, cycling, and marathon running across 5 different islands. Thanks. And so by the age of 44, I had exceeded even my wildest athletic ambitions for myself. But my greatest achievement is not athletic. My greatest achievement is that I healed myself, not just in body and not just in mind, but in spirit. I'm nobody special. I'm just an ordinary guy who happened to do something extraordinary. But if my story stands for anything, it's that change, both personal change and global change, isn't just possible, it's our prerogative. It's our prerogative. The truth is that adopting a plant-based diet or a plant-based approach to your plate is the single most powerful, most positively impactful thing that you can do as a conscious compassionate consumer. It is the medicine that will prevent and reverse disease. It will significantly reduce your carbon footprint, and it will preserve the earth for our children, for future generations, and for our animal friends alike. If you change your plate, it will change who you are. It will change how you are. And it will change the world. And it might, just might, even turn you into a superhero. So thanks. Thanks, you guys.